The Copper Age of comics was an era of great change for comic books. The black and white independent publishing movement sprang up, entire comic book universes banded together in all-encompassing limited series for the first time, and comics took a darker, more adult tone to appeal to a broader audience. In this video, we're counting down the top 10 Copper Age comics to invest in. Let's go. With a list like this, it can get pretty repetitive, as the natural thing to do is to just list off the top 10 most valuable books of the age. And as fun as that would be, most of us are already aware that books like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, Albedo #2, Amazing Spider-Man 300, and New Mutants 98 are pretty popular and valuable books. The purpose of this list is to shine the light on some other Copper Age keys that may be flying under your radar, or at least not the most obvious Copper Age books that we could talk about. There are even a few books that I would normally include on this list, but I'm leaving them off since we've already discussed them in some previous videos, specifically Sandman #1, Sandman #8, and Primer 2. Be sure to check out our top 10 comics playlist if you want to see what we had to say about those issues and a variety of other investment-worthy comics. Check the description below for a link to that playlist. If you stick around to the end of the video, I'll share a tip that will help you identify even more Copper and early modern age comics that may be worth putting on your shopping list. If we're just meeting, my name is Drew Stewart and I'm the owner of Como Comic Books, a comic book vendor based out of Columbia, Missouri. On our YouTube channel, we focus on bringing you the best tips and tricks to help you take your comic collection to the next level. Now, let's get into the list. In the latest edition of Things I Don't Understand, we find Crow #1. This non-first appearance issue from February of 1989 is currently selling for more than the Crow's first appearance in Caliber Presents #1. The Crow #1 features the second appearance of James O'Barr's The Crow. Also published by Caliber, The Crow #1 ran through 3 different printings, which is something you'll want to keep an eye out for, as the 3 printings are indistinguishable looking solely at the front cover. However, you can identify the different printings based on the date printed inside the front cover, with the first prints being published in February 1989, as I previously mentioned. High-grade raw copies of The Crow #1 are currently bringing around $750, while the character's first appearance is only bringing $400 for comparable high-grade copies. The Crow was immortalized by Brandon Lee in the 1994 film with the same name, when Lee was killed tragically during filming. If you're a fan of small press comic books, then The Crow #1 needs to be on your shopping list. Coming in at the #9 spot, we have an X-Men key that is well off of previous high prices from just a few years ago. X-Factor #6. This July 1986 issue features the first appearance of one of the X-Men's fiercest foes, Apocalypse. Written by Louise Simonson with interior pencils provided by Butch Geiss, the cover for X-Factor 6 was penciled by Ron Frenz and inked by Joe Rubinstein. As of the recording of this video, high-grade raw copies are selling in the $40 range, where this book was previously selling for $75 to $100 plus back when Fox's X-Men Apocalypse movie was in development. Following the lackluster performance of the film, X-Factor 6 has faded in value and is positioned to see an increase if the Apocalypse character is better utilized in the MCU, which seems like a fairly low bar to cross. Our #8 book features a rematch for the ages, as Wolverine returns to face off with the Incredible Hulk once again in Incredible Hulk 340. As if this fight wasn't enough of a draw, the issue features one of the 1980s best covers from up-and-coming Marvel artist Todd McFarlane, who was just on the cusp of becoming a bona fide rock star. Incredible Hulk 340 was published in February of 1988, starting off what would be a banner year for the Todd father, who would begin his now legendary run on Amazing Spider-Man the following month, and in May of 1988 would co-create one of comics' most popular characters, Venom. Written by storied Hulk scribe Peter David, with cover and interior art from McFarlane, Incredible Hulk 340 is the product of two creative masters at the top of their game. High-grade raw copies can be picked up for just under $150, while a buyer looking for a CGC 9.8 copy should expect to spend in the neighborhood of $900, with recent high sales topping out at $1,195. If you're a collector of classic covers, don't miss out on this late 80s Marvel classic. If you're getting value out of this video, do me a favor and hit the like button. Likes, comments, and sharing of our content lets YouTube know that you enjoy our videos. We're on a mission to hit 10,000 subscribers in 2021, so if you're not already subscribed to the channel, I hope you will consider subscribing. Thank you to all of you who have already joined our community. And now, let's get back into the list. Haunting the number 7 spot is none other than Evil Ernie #1. Published by Eternity in December 1991, Evil Ernie #1 features the first appearance of Evil Ernie and Lady Death. Written by Brian Pulido with art from Stephen Hughes, Evil Ernie #1 is Pulido's first published comic book work. Pulido would eventually move the characters over to his own publishing company, Chaos Comics, but would go on to see the rights to the title character fall under the control of another company. If you'd like to hear more about Brian's journey in the comic industry over the last 30 years, be sure to check out the Talking Comics episode where I was able to sit down with him last summer. I'll put a link to it in the cards up above. A tough issue to find in high grade due to its black cover, high grade raw copies of Evil Ernie are currently bringing prices around the $500 mark. This early 90s horror key is likely to continue to see strong demand as the Lady Death character continues to be massively popular, with multiple crowdfunded volumes of her ongoing story being produced by Pulido's current imprint, Coffin Comics. Fighting its way to the number 6 spot is Tales of the Teen Titans #44, the first appearance of Nightwing. It turns out that being a sidekick for the entirety of your developmental years gets a little old after a bit, or so it did for young master Dick Grayson. Having left behind the mantle of Robin at the end of New Teen Titans 39, which, in my opinion, may be the most beautiful cover George Perez ever drew, Dick Grayson dons the Nightwing persona for the first time in Part 3 of the classic Teen Titans story, The Judas Contract. Co-written by Marv Wolfman and Perez, with Perez cover and interior art, Tales of the Teen Titans 44 is still an oddly affordable DC Key issue. High-grade raw copies will currently set a prospective buyer back around $80, which is not bad for a significant first appearance that's nearly 40 years old, as this issue was published in July of 1984. If you're a fan of the Bat family, keep your eyes peeled for a copy of Tales of the Teen Titans 44. Blasting its way into the top 5, our number 5 book is G.I. Joe #1. Published in June of 1982, G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero #1, as the full title of the book reads, is a treasure trove of first appearances for both Joes and their rivals, Cobra. A short list of those making their first appearance in G.I. Joe #1 is Cobra Commander, Hawk, Baroness, Snake Eyes, Scarlet, my personal favorite Joe, Rock and Roll, and several others. Written by Larry Hama with cover and interior art from Herb Trimpe, in the main story, G.I. Joe #1 kicked off the Marvel series that would go on for an impressive 155 issues, which is a rare feat for a comic that was based on a cartoon series. G.I. Joe was so star-spangled awesome in the 1980s that nearly every kid had at least one Joe in their toy box. And for those of you who are older than me and that could read before the end of the 80s, you probably had a few of these G.I. Joe comics laying around as well. G.I. Joe #1 has experienced a significant price increase over the last 12 months. Prior to February 2020, no sales above 400 for a CGC 9.8 copy had been recorded since the book initially spiked leading up to the release of G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra in 2009. In October 2020, a 9.8 broke $1,000 for the first time, and just mere days ago, as of the recording of this video, a CGC 9.8 copy sold for an astounding $4,990. Averaging around $1,600 and 9.8 at the current moment, high-grade raw copies are bringing upwards of $200. Nostalgia for 80s intellectual properties seem to be hitting critical mass as prices for everything from TMNT, Garbage Pail Kids, and G.I. Joe are rapidly moving upwards. The good news is the market is moving faster than many retailers or sellers may be, so keep an eye out for books like G.I. Joe #1 that are underpriced, hiding in back issue boxes. Fumbling its way into the #4 spot is The Tick #1 Special Edition. Published in March of 1988, The Tick #1 Special Edition is the first appearance of one of comics' greatest philosophers, The Tick. Created, written, and drawn by Ben Edlund and published by New England Comics, the issue starts off with the Tick being locked up in an asylum. Upon leaving, he does what any sane person would do. He decides to become a superhero. The first series of The Tick would run for 12 issues, with all 12 issues running through multiple printings. A quick note on these multiple printings: there is an important distinction to be made between The Tick #1 Special Edition and The Tick #1, which ran through a total of 9 printings. Only the white background Special Edition is considered to be the Tick's first appearance. The first printing of Tick #1 was published in June of 1988 and features a black background. And while it includes the same story as the Special Edition, CGC does not note it as the character's first appearance. Each of the subsequent printings have different background colors, which could make for a fun side quest for your collection. As of the recording of this video, high-grade raw copies of the Tick #1 Special Edition will run you upwards of $300, while the later published Tick #1 can be had for around $100 in high grade. The Tick would go on to star in his own cartoon and live-action television series, furthering his reach into pop culture. The Tick is not your standard tights and flights superhero comic, and I cannot recommend it enough for a collector who is looking for something a little different to add to their collection. Coming in at the #3 spot is Amazing Spider-Man 316, which features the first full cover appearance of Venom. Published in June of 1989, this classic Todd McFarlane cover drives the value for the book. The story from David Michelinie is just Venom's 3rd appearance overall, with his first and second appearances coming in ASM 300 and 315, respectively. Amazing Spider-Man 316 was overlooked by collectors for many years, as Amazing Spider-Man 300 sucked most of the oxygen out of the room. Today, ASM 300 is selling for prices that exceed the budgets of many collectors, and as such, collectors are now turning to ASM 316 as a desirable and more affordable alternative. Amazing Spider-Man 300 has an instantly recognizable cover, and the cover has received countless homages over the years, but in my opinion, for a Venom fan, it doesn't get any better than ASM 316. This issue is the first and last time we see the original version of Venom on the cover. By the time Venom reappears on a cover in Amazing Spider-Man 332, Eric Larson has taken over the art duties and begins changing the character into the slimy, drooling, ridiculously long-tongued Venom we've had for the last 30 years. At the time of recording this video, a high-grade raw copy of Amazing Spider-Man 316 will set you back $200. While CGC 9.8s are currently trending at just over $600. CGC 9.8 newsstand editions, however, are bringing more than $1,000. If you're a Venom fan but have sticker shock from ASM 300, give Amazing Spider-Man 316 a good look. Keeping the McFarlane train rolling in the #2 spot is Batman 423. This book has had a busy couple of years. 5 years ago, Batman 423, which was originally published in September of 1988, was just another low-dollar filler issue of Batman, despite all the things it had going for it. A classic Todd McFarlane cover, a superstar creative team on the interior comprised of Jim Starlin and Dave Cockrum, and a very memorable story titled You Should Have Seen Him. And then, all of a sudden, this book took off. I was buying this book in quantity at $3 and $5 for years, and then all of a sudden it was a $20 book, then $50, and now a high-grade raw copy of this book will set you back $150. If that $150 is a bit outside of your budget, I do have good news for you. This issue ran through 3 different printings, all of which feature the same classic McFarlane cover, which is clearly an early example of the cape work he would become known for in Spawn, and the second and third printings come in at $50 for a high-grade raw copy. Sales for CGC 9.8 copies of the first print have been strong as well. Prior to 2017, no copy had ever sold for more than $250. Today, CGC 9.8 sales are averaging just below $1,200. Whether you're simply a Batman fan or drawn to this issue as a fan of Spawn, as I originally was, Batman 423 is a book that should be on your list or in your collection. Let's take a quick time out to recognize a couple of members of the community who recently commented on our videos. So a big shout out to Brian Wilson and Jacob Reynolds for leaving comments on some of our recent content. If you'd like to see your comments featured in a future video, be sure that you're engaging in the comment section on any of our posts. And now let's reveal the #1 book on our list. Topping our list of the top 10 Copper Age comics to invest in is Jeff Smith's classic Bone #1. Published in July 1991 by Cartoon Books, Bone #1 is arguably the last great black and white independent comic series of the black and white indie comic scene that produced such other notable comic book properties as Cerebus, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Usagi Yojimbo, and many more from the late 1970s through the 1980s and wrapping up in the early 1990s. Featuring the first comic book appearances of Phone Bone, Phony Bone, Smiley Bone, Thorn, and the Rat Creatures, Smith had previously published Bone strips in his college newspaper while attending Ohio State University. A smash hit from the start, Bone #1 ran through 9 printings, with the Bone logo appearing in a different color for each printing. The first printing features a red logo, while subsequent printings featured green, yellow, orange, and other colored logos. With a small print run and a recently announced Netflix show in development, Bone #1 is as hot as ever. If you're tired of chasing the same superhero comics like everyone else, a book like Bone #1 is a great book to set your sights on. A Grail level book for a Copper Age collector, prices for Bone #1 continue to stay high. Currently, a prospective buyer should expect to spend in the neighborhood of $6,000 for a high-grade raw copy. The relative scarcity of the book means that few sales of CGC copies are available for reference, with only 10 CGC sales for copies graded 9.2 or higher in the previous 12 months. Pairing a dark background with a low print run means that CGC 9.8 copies are few and far between, and their price reflects that, with the most recent sale of a CGC 9.8 in November of 2020 bringing $13,200. To date, only 23 copies of Bone #1 have graded out at 9.8 according to the CGC census. However, recent sales of a CGC 9.4 and a CGC 9.2 for $22.50 and $21.25 should reassure interested collectors that don't have a 5-figure budget but are still willing to spend in the low 4 figures for an investment level book. Bone #1 has been a sought after book since its release nearly 30 years ago, and depending on the success of the Netflix project, could quickly see an increase in interest, which will only serve to drive demand up further. And now for our collecting tip. The next time you're at your local comic shop, comic show, or flea market, keep an eye out for back issues of Wizard magazine. Typically, you will find these in discount bins for $1 or less for most issues. Pick a couple of these issues up, take them home, and check out the hot comics or top comics listings inside. Collecting tends to be cyclical, and what was once hot often will come back around. Right now is the time to be picking up Copper and Modern Age keys you want to get in your collection or portfolio. With prices of Silver and Bronze Age keys increasing rapidly, it's only a matter of time before collectors move into the more recent Copper and Modern Ages, where prices have not increased as aggressively. Like with hair metal, 1991 was the last gasp of the Copper Age of comics. 1992 would bring grunge, Euro Disney, Windows 3.1, Image Comics, and the birth of the modern age of comics. From now on, the guns would be bigger, the pouches would be even more plentiful, and the reboots would become all too familiar. On the horizon were chrome covers, cutout covers, covers with holograms, acetate covers, comics with the phrase collector's item printed on them, and the bursting of a speculation bubble that would nearly bankrupt the industry. Despite it all, the Copper Age of comics is coming into its own as Silver and Bronze Age books price themselves out of consideration for more and more collectors, and nostalgia for the 80s and early 90s reaches critical mass. Happy hunting out there, and don't forget to collect responsibly. We will see you in the next video.